Hi everyone, this is a video that has been on my radar for a while. I mean, the subject has been on my radar, something that I've wanted to talk about. And I'd actually go so far as to say I feel it's a civic duty to talk about this. Now, that doesn't mean that it's enjoyable. Frankly, I find it depressing. But I've always said that on my channel I will cover taboo subjects. I will cover things that I feel are important enough to cover. There's been a case that's been going on recently, and it's made quite a lot of media coverage, and it's a case of a couple in Hertfordshire who got arrested, held for hours, all over an online feud. Now, this is not the first time we've heard about something like this, and if we keep going on this trajectory, unfortunately, it won't be the last time. There's been a follow-up to the case, so perhaps it's appropriate that I'm reading it out now rather than the initial report, because this is more like a follow-up. So I'm just going to read it out. This is from the BBC, and it's from a couple of days ago, specifically the 31st of March. The report is by Louise Parry. So I'll just read this out and then share my thoughts. But very quickly, before I read it out, I think it does reiterate that we do have a free speech problem in this country. Quite a concerning free speech problem. Now, I do not believe that JD Vance and the United States of America have any right to lecture this country, particularly given the Trump administration's on record on the free press, but I'll come back to that. But, you know, that doesn't mean that there isn't issues here. There is. And Keir Starmer is in denial about it. His government is in denial about it. You know, his response to JD Vance was, we have a proud history of free speech in this country. Well, we do, but on his watch it is eroding. And this case highlights that. So I'm just going to read it out. A police force is carrying out a rapid and thorough review after a couple were arrested over complaints they made about their daughter's primary school, which included comments on WhatsApp. Maxie Allen and his partner Rosalind Levine from Borehamwood told the Times they were held for 11 hours on suspicion of harassment, malicious communications and causing a nuisance on school property. Hertfordshire Police said the arrests were necessary to fully investigate the allegations, but there was insufficient evidence to take any action. It's worth noting they haven't issued a single apology to this couple, even though they found there was no insufficient evidence to take further action. The county's Police and Crime Commissioner, Jonathan Ash Edwards, said there has clearly been a fundamental breakdown in relationships between the school and parents that shouldn't have come to a police matter. That shouldn't have become a police matter. The elected Conservative PCC had asked the Chief Constable for an explanation and said a review was taking place. While people should be courteous and go through the proper channels when raising concerns about a public service, the public should be able to express their views without worrying they'll get a knock on the door from the police, added Mr Ash Edwards in a post on X. Credit to him for speaking out, but he should. It's his job, you know, he needs to speak out. According to the Times, the couple said they had previously been banned from entering Cowley Hill Primary School in Borehamwood after questioning the recruitment process for a head teacher and criticising the leadership in their parents' WhatsApp group. Now, this was a private group. This wasn't something that, you know, it's not like they were smearing someone publicly and trying to humiliate someone. This was a private group. The school said it had sought advice from police after a high volume of direct correspondence and public social media posts that it said had become upsetting for staff, parents and governors. Mr Allen, a Times radio producer, said 6 police officers turned up to his house on January the 29th this year. I'm going to read that out again. 6 police officers turned up at his home on January the 29th this year. And there's footage of that showing that this was indeed the case. 6 police officers. We're not talking about some major drug baron. We're not talking about a major gang leader. We're not talking about a high-profile predator. We're talking about a man who had a feud with his daughter's school. 6 police officers. He told the Times, I was just in complete disbelief. It was just unfathomable to me that things had escalated to this degree. He added, I believe the school tried to use the police to close down legitimate inquiries, and for some reason the constabulary played along. The couple said they emailed the school regularly following the ban to address issues related to the needs of their daughter, who suffers from epilepsy and neurodivergent and is registered disabled. So of course they're going to want to reach out and try to find a solution to this. An officer issued a warning to the family in December and told them to take their daughter out of school, which they did the next month. Obviously, that school caused a lot of turmoil to the young girl. A week before the arrest, the Times said. Mr. Allen said, "We've never used abusive or threatening language, even in private, and always followed due process." That's a very important point. I'll come back to it. A spokesperson for Cowley Hill Primary School told the Times, "We're always happy for parents to raise concerns, but we do ask they do this in a suitable way and in line with the school's published complaints procedure." The couple told the BBC on Monday, "We greatly welcome the PCC's statement that this should never become a matter for the police. We also look forward to the outcome of the Chief Constable's review. Should the police wish to contact us, we would be pleased to engage and find a swift way of drawing a line under this incident so all concerned can move on." Hertfordshire Police said following reports of harassment and malicious communications, which are criminal offences, a man and a woman from Borehamwood, both aged in their 40s, were arrested on Wednesday the 29th of January. Following further investigations, officers deemed that no further action should be taken due to insufficient evidence. In relation to the police visit on the 20th of December, a complaint was submitted, which was reviewed by our Professional Standards Department. It was deemed that the service provided by officers was appropriate. Mr. Ash Edwards said the findings of the review would be discussed at an accountability meeting on Tuesday. I think this couple are being very reasonable under the circumstances. If it was me, I would be hopping mad about it, quite honestly. I saw the man's interview on the Times radio. He didn't come across as a thug. He didn't come across as a violent individual, an aggressive, bullying individual in any way, shape or form. I think what's happened here is the school didn't like parents scrutinising the recruitment practices. Specifically, this was about appointing a new, I think it was a vice principal, and the parents felt that there was a lack of transparency in this. Now, as the man said himself, his wife used some spicy language. I believe she called one of the school administrators a control freak. So what? Frankly, so what? I think it is a disgrace that the school decided to get the police involved because they couldn't handle criticism. And it is an utter disgrace that Hertfordshire Police has decided to send around 6 constables. Now, there's a few things that stand out here. Firstly, the police have admitted that there is no evidence to take further action. So they should be issuing an apology. They should be issuing an apology for the emotional distress that they caused this couple. 11 hours in detention. 11 hours in detention. There's a lot of questions about this. If the police technically had to follow up, because technically, thanks to absurd legislation passed in Parliament, a crime may have been committed. Although I think it is very, very questionable in of itself. But anyway, we'll come back to that. If they technically had to follow up, why 6 officers? I don't know what the rate for Hertfordshire Police's response to burglaries is, or violent assaults. I'm sure the county of Hertfordshire, it's got over 1 million people, I'm sure they have some pretty serious crimes going on. So to have 6 officers deal with this, that is a serious question. And I would like to see how they justify that. Even if they really, really did have to follow up, 6 officers is clearly an absurd overreach. I agree on this occasion with Toby Young of the Free Speech Union that it is absolutely valid that parents ask questions of a taxpayer-funded public institution. I really think what's happened in this case is the school has been overly sensitive and they've just tried to shut down debate. Now, they say that they're transparent and they say that they want, they welcome concerns being raised, but the fact that they've randled the police, I mean, really, if you're going to rundle the police because someone's called you a control freak, I think that's over the top. Maybe the woman shouldn't have used that language, but this sort of thing really shouldn't escalate to the point of the police getting involved. It really, really shouldn't. And another point is, why do the police automatically take the side of the school? There's 2 sides to every story. The fact that the police decided to just arrest this couple. Another big question that has to be asked, they claim it was necessary whilst they investigated. Does it take 11 hours to investigate? I look at the back and forth on that WhatsApp group. I can't imagine that would take 11 hours. It's welcome that there's going to be an inquiry into this. I'm going to put a link to this BBC report and also the Times radio interview. Like I say, the man didn't come across as aggressive or unreasonable in any way. Now, I could understand if there had been threats, if school staff had been threatened. I can believe that in this country there will be some parents who go too far, that will be aggressive to school staff. There are times that teachers unfortunately put up with abuse and they shouldn't have to. But I do not believe, I just don't see any evidence that that is the case. And as far as I'm concerned, the only way that the police should get involved is if there is credible threats. I really, really don't think the police have any business monitoring a bit of bad language online, and it isn't even particularly bad language. Where the woman calls one of the administrators a control freak. The idea that that should be a police matter, it's an utter disgrace. And a disclaimer here, I messaged Hertfordshire Police to tell them what I thought of this. I couldn't send a direct complaint because you have to have personally witnessed it. They actually have a thing on the website saying if you've witnessed abuse of power or corruption, but you have to have personally witnessed it. And there was a segment for other points of contact, so I used that. And I told them exactly what I thought of this. I also contacted the school to tell them what I thought of them weaponising the police the way they did. Even if there is a bit more to this, and maybe there were some, let's say, insulting things said that perhaps isn't being disclosed, perhaps there is a little bit more to it. We always have to err on the side of what if. Okay, let's say there were some insulting terms used. Again, should that really be a police case? I don't believe it should. Not at a time when the police responses to serious crimes is not always high standard. Not at a time when we see some very serious crimes going on in society. And like I say, Hertfordshire is going to have a lot of serious crimes going on. So, it would be one thing to say, oh, this is just a freak incident, an aberration, it should never have happened. The sad thing is, and the concerning thing is, it's not polarised. It's not an isolated incident. We've seen other similar incidents where police have turned up to people's doorsteps for using the wrong language online. We're not talking about East Germany in the 70s. We're not talking about China today. We're talking about the United Kingdom in 2025. And frankly, I think the government's both complacent and in denial about this. For Starmer to say we've got no free speech issues in this country, it's utterly disingenuous. And I think there are Labour people who are just biased because it happens to be going on during their watch. Now, it didn't begin on Labour's watch. This sort of stuff has been going on for a number of years now. It was happening under the Tories as well. But frankly, one incident is one too many. It is deeply, deeply alarming that people have to fear a knock on their door because they've had a dispute online. I would like it to be explained what exactly is meant by malicious communication. Are we going to get to a point where someone cannot complain about their elected member of parliament because it will be deemed to be malicious communication? I think that would be deeply, deeply alarming. People in positions of power, whether they be parliamentarians, judges, although there's no direct point of contact for judges, senior newspaper editors, business people, I think anyone in a position of power has to have tough skin and accept that they're open to scrutiny. Now, they're allowed to defend themselves. And I made the point to the school, if you thought the criticism that the parents were making was unfair, you can defend yourselves. But to run to the police is an absolute disgrace and will do them absolutely no favours in terms of their reputation. And for Hertfordshire Police to do this, now I'm pleased that an inquiry has been opened, and all I can assume is there's been a big backlash. I hope there's been. And Hertfordshire Police wasn't expecting it. But I can't help but feel police forces are taking these options, not because they really have to, but because it's an easy choice, picking on ordinary people, not dangerous criminals, ordinary people who've had a dispute online. I mean, the fact that police immediately took the side of the school, the fact that they felt the need to hold this couple for 11 hours. Incidentally, the man's mentioned that he is now having a sort of post-traumatic stress disorder. Whenever he sees the police in the street, he gets nervous. He sees them outside. He gets nervous. Why they were held for 11 hours and why 6 officers attended this. Even if the police technically had to follow up, clearly common sense went out the window. What the police should have done is went, look, we're following up, but there's no case to really answer. The fact that they decided to go on this aggressively, the fact that they have failed to apologise shows an arrogance. I do think it's an abuse of power. And shame on Hertfordshire Police for acting like the Stasi. It's deeply frustrating, it's concerning, and it's happening too much. And frankly, Labour's record on it is not good. Like I say, this didn't begin under Labour, it was going on in the Tory years as well. But Labour is in denial about it. If government, if I had one question for the Labour Party, I would say, what is your attitude to free speech? I have no problem with someone who is threatening violence being held accountable. That is a very different thing, particularly during a time of urban riots, as we saw last year during the summer's riots. So I do think that is different from this case. I think, for example, inciting violence, talking about burning down a hotel with people inside, I do think that is serious. It's fanning the flames, it's reckless, it is putting lives in danger. So I would advocate taking that seriously. Not as seriously as actual violence. So for example, if I'm a judge and I see two people, some thug who's been actually rioting and throwing Molotov cocktails at the police and at a hotel, I would definitely issue a harsher sentence to them than someone who has said to their followers, go and burn down the hotel. But I would still advocate a custodial sentence to the latter. Not as strong as the former, but I don't think that's trivial. Now, that is very, very different than someone having a dispute with their daughter's school. The fact that the police immediately took the side of the school is concerning. The whole case is a depressing indictment of where we are at. And like I say, this isn't an aberration. This isn't something that, whoa, that's a shocking case, but it's never happened before or since. There's been other similar cases. Frankly, even if the police turn up at someone's door and say, oh, there's nothing to follow up on, have a nice day, and they leave, that is bad enough. The police should not be involved in this. They just shouldn't. And I think it needs to be really clarified what is meant by malicious communication. I mean, there's a big difference between issuing someone a threat and criticising. It's deeply, deeply concerning. This is actually a serious, serious issue of democracy. Because if we're going to get to a point where you cannot criticise institutions and people in power, or you have to be so hypersensitive around it, it's like walking on eggshells. The public have a right to be angry. The public have a right to ask questions, particularly of institutions. If someone feels that their MP is doing a sloppy job, I think they have a right to say so, short of, threatening violence. Obviously, that crosses a line. But frankly, I think if someone wants to criticise their MP, they have a right to. The MP has a right to defend themselves. But frankly, free speech is under attack in this country. I think it would be an exaggeration to say we're a police state. And I reiterate that JD Vance, of all people, is in no position to lecture this country when he's part of an administration that's cozying up to Vladimir Putin, parroting Russian propaganda. We should take no lectures from the Americans on this. Trump's administration would dearly like to control all American press. They've recently taken aggressive actions against the Voice of America, Radio Free Asia, Radio Free Europe, which are American broadcasters. The Trump administration has taken aggressive actions against them. So they're in no position to lecture this country on free speech. But that doesn't mean that we don't have problems. It doesn't mean that we could be complacent about this. And we see too many police forces all too willing to endorse this, to lap it up. So I call on all principled members of Parliament to speak out on this, to stand up for freedom of speech. And I call for all decent police chiefs to get back to the side of common sense. When police departments put resources into this, it angers the public, it concerns the public, it worries the public, and it makes people think, whose side are you on? When you're putting resources into this and not putting the priority on dangerous, violent criminals. Now, Hertfordshire Police will probably turn around and say, oh, look, we arrested this drug dealer, we arrested this murderer. Good. But the public isn't going to look at that. They're going to say, well, wait a second. You held a couple for 11 hours for essentially having an opinion. This is really quite shocking. Again, we're not talking about East Germany. We're talking about Britain in 2025. If I'm ever in this position, I do think people, if you're a law-abiding member of the public, your instinct is to work with the police, but you have to defend yourself. I hope this couple, I think they've been extremely reasonable. I think they should take legal action against the police for the distress that they, if it was me, I would seriously think about taking legal action against the police for the distress caused. To send out a message, I mean, I do think police forces need to get a backlash, because if they don't, they'll continue doing this. I'm pleased, I welcome the inquiry, and fair play to the PCC in that area, but this sort of thing is happening far too much. And I'm going to wrap this up, but it's an absolute disgrace that Hertfordshire Police think this was appropriate, and their failure to apologise shows an arrogance. I mean, I contacted them to express what I thought of this as a citizen, but it'll be some low-level administrator. It won't be any senior police officer who will read that. So that's the danger. The other danger, and I'll round off with this, is that we sort of say, oh, it's terrible, but it doesn't happen all the time, and to kind of dismiss it until it happens to us as individuals. If I'm ever in this situation, because I am quite opinionated, if I'm ever in this situation, I would not take it lying down. I would absolutely make a thing of it. I would go through the process that I had to go through. I wouldn't deliberately aggravate the situation, but we absolutely must stand up for our rights. There's times I think the police do have a very difficult job, and I'm sympathetic to them. But when we see this sort of thing, it's just, they do themselves no favours. So sometimes say, oh, but you'll call the police if you're a victim of crime. Well, that's a ridiculous argument, because the public have a right to be frustrated with the police taking the wrong priorities. This sort of thing makes a mockery of policing. It makes a mockery of back to basics policing, policing which is about helping victims of crime, not harassing a couple because they've had an argument with the daughter's school. And again, crucially, no threats were made. The couple wasn't threatening staff. It just seems that the police decided they were going to be biased towards the school. For what reason, I don't know. But the fact that they felt it necessary to send 6 officers, I wonder, did any of those officers feel foolish? Did they question themselves, what are we really doing here? Is this why I got into the police? Because they should. They should question themselves. I understand a low-level constable can't speak out against chief superintendent, but maybe if regular police officers did speak out a bit more, then this sort of thing would happen less. I'm sure there's a lot of retired officers who look at this and despair and think this is not what policing should be about. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. But it's very, very concerning, and it's very depressing. This should not be happening in Britain in 2025. It just shouldn't. So what should come out of this? Hertfordshire Police should guarantee this will never happen again. They should issue an apology to the couple. The school needs to get over itself and not be so hypersensitive. They have a right to defend themselves if they feel the criticism was unfair, but to run to the police is a disgrace. Like I say, the only caveat is if threats were made. No threats were made. And on a broader picture, police accountability is a major issue here, but we also get into the issue of legislation. Malicious communication, what is that? Because one person's criticising a figure in authority is another person's abuse. It's an example of a very poorly defined law. I mean, what's to say you can't have an MP who's criticised and decides, oh, it's malicious communication because I just can't handle criticism, so I'll go to the police and get one of my constituents arrested. What's to say that, you won't get another authority figure doing that? It's very, very concerning. People must have a right to speak out. I agree with Toby Young on that. particularly for a taxpayer-funded public institution, people must have the right to criticise. That is an essential part of free speech. And the police have to answer a question. Do they want to be part of a trajectory where we are seeing an erosion of free speech? Or do they want to be people who stand up for victims of crime, who want to, police, back to basics policing, reassure the public instead of aggravate the public? Because what we are seeing, it's a disgrace what the police are doing. Even if technically they had to follow up, I see no justification for 6 officers turning up to the door of this family like they were some sort of dangerous criminals. And remember, they have a young, vulnerable daughter who no doubt would have been frightened by the experience. It's a disgrace. I hope the family, I don't think they're going to, but I really hope they consider taking legal action against the police for emotional distress. I would sue them. Because bad publicity, the police complain about this, but they bring it on themselves by making these sort of decisions. I'm going to round up with that. But it's very, very concerning, and it shouldn't happen again. And Starmer's government is lying when it says there's no free speech issues in this country, because there are.